It was the height of nuclear paranoia. In 1962, the United States and Soviet Union were moments away from causing a massive catastrophe in what would later be known as the Cuban Missile Crisis, with the US even going to DEFCON 2, one is war, and a Soviet nuclear sub where 2 out of 3 men authorized a nuclear strike. But cooler heads prevailed and it was averted. This close call would strike fear and paranoia into the minds of many people, who feared that a nuclear apocalypse could happen at any time. This environment would lead to 2 movies addressing this topic. One would be a serious thriller, and the other a comedy. These 2 films would be directed by powerhouse directors whose names reverberate to this day, Sidney Lumet and Stanley Kubrick, and they would face off with their versions of a tale about complete disaster. Kubrick was very interested in nuclear warfare and all the procedures that involved around it. He did extensive research, subscribing to numerous military magazines, reading many books, one of them being a novel called Red Alert by Peter George. Bryant is his pen name, a tale which warned about a rogue general ordering a nuclear attack on the Soviets, which Kubrick decided to adapt. He originally decided to adapt it seriously, but upon developing it, he increasingly saw it as being quite humorous, a situation in which the world could end because of a crazy person. Upon his realization, Kubrick hired comedic novelist Terry Southern to help him write the script, and they transformed it into a satirical comedy. At a similar time, Sidney Lumet decided to adapt a novel called Failsafe by Eugene Burdick and Harvey Wheeler. It was a popular book about a computer error causing planes to be ordered to nuke Moscow. Lumet wanted to adapt it seriously as he thought the subject matter was important, and the film was financed independently by former United Artists executive Max Youngstein, and it was written by blacklisted screenwriter Walter Bernstein. Dr. Strangelove starts out at a military base, where a RAF officer from the Officer Exchange Program is ordered to send a Plane R to some B-52 bombers, and the military base is to hunker down, and all radios are supposed to be turned off. Plan R is a plan to nuke the Soviets, and to only be used if the president and all other major leaders are down. So the B-52 crew, led by a charismatic cowboy, get the instructions, and thinking that their country has been devastated, believes it's their duty to attack. The only problem, of course, is that they haven't been attacked. The general has gone rogue, and it's become a crisis as the president meets with all his top officials in the war room and try to find a way to stop the situation from happening, mainly needing the recall code so they can message the bombers, but only the rogue general knows what it is. Failsafe starts more loosely, where we see a general having a bad dream, a house party discussion about nuclear war, and a congressman who visits the Air Force Command Center. There's some similarities between this film and Jurassic Park, especially with the outsider who questions the whole system and sees how disastrous it could be. In Jurassic Park, it's Jeff Goldblum's character.
Don't you see the danger, John, inherent in what you're doing here?
In Failsafe, it's Congressman Raskov.
Now they take over. They start creating situations.
Not necessarily.
There's always the chance. You said so yourself.
The film shows various characters going about their day, until the error all of a sudden happens. The bombers are sent the go-ahead due to a computer error, which is the main difference from Strangelove. Otherwise, they're quite similar, with them being about planes going to bomb the Soviet Union against the express wishes of the president, and they're having difficulty calling the planes back. Failsafe accounts for an error in technology, while Doctor Strange takes into account the more human element. Besides the minor plot differences and tone of the films, Failsafe takes place in more sets, primarily the bunker with the president and his translator, the Pentagon War Room, the plane, and the Air Force Command Center. While in Doctor Strange, it's primarily the military base, the B-52, and the War Room. Failsafe takes into account a more realistic scenario, and despite the lower budget and absolute lack of government cooperation, not even being able to get stock footage of planes from rental houses, having to reuse a lot of the footage they managed to get, pulled it off quite well, capturing a tense environment that was claustrophobic at times. Strangelove's set was mostly realistic, especially with the B-52, which, despite them also having no government cooperation, were able to, through books, design a B-52 that, according to some visiting Air Force personnel, was accurate to the button. Lumet just used a broken commercial flight simulator. The War Room is a set with an expressionist design, being massive in its size, with massive boards and a huge overhanging light, with lots of people, few who say anything, and a massive ceiling with a slanted roof. Its size may not be the most realistic, but it serves its purpose for being a satirical comedy. The big room makes the big men look quite small and insignificant, and allows for people to move about and create some great comedy.
Look at the big boy. They're getting ready to clobber us.
It also just looks cool. which is most important. The production designer was Ken Adam, who also did work on Bond movies. The minimal sets also simplify the story, so it's more focused and straightforward. The casts of both are great, with Strangelove having Peter Sellers, George C. Scott, Sterling Hayden, and James Earl Jones, while Failsafe had Henry Fonda, Walter Matthau, and Dom DeLuise. Peter Sellers really carried a lot of the weight for Strangelove, as he played 3 roles: the President, the RAF officer, and Doctor Strange himself, who was based on the mad scientist in Metropolis, and on scientists in the American government, who were German before 1945. He also played a character who played multiple characters in Kubrick's previous film, Lolita, so it was nothing new for him. The funny thing is that for 2 of the 3 characters he plays, he was essentially the straight man, counteracting as a balance to George C. Scott's character, the Russian premier.
Hello, Dmitri. Listen, I can't hear too well. Do you suppose you could turn the music down just a little?
The rogue general.
Pure water to replenish our precious bodily fluids. Are you beginning to understand?
And Doctor Strange. Sellers was also supposed to play Major Kong, but opposed it because of the difficulty of mastering a Texan accent, and because he felt it was too many roles. Coincidentally, he fell out of the aircraft set, which injured him just enough to where he couldn't play Kong, but he could play his other roles. It was quite convenient for him, and Kubrick relented, casting a character actor he met on the set of One-Eyed Jacks, a film he considered directing, Slim Pickens, who was very much a true cowboy. When he arrived to set, people thought he arrived in costume, but he didn't. He was dressed normally.
Nuclear combat, toe-to-toe with the Ruskies.
Strangelove was also the first role for James Earl Jones, who was spotted in a theatrical production with another cast member, George C. Scott. Scott played the role of the wacky General Turgidson. Scott was tricked by Kubrick into playing up the role by Kubrick telling him to overact in many takes to loosen up, and Kubrick would then use that take, much to Scott's chagrin.
Well, I mean, you ought to see it sometime. It's a sight, a big plane like a 52 room.
Kubrick also used noir icon Sterling Hayden as the rogue general, who he was able to coax out of retirement. In Failsafe, Henry Fonda had worked with Lumet before, notably in 12 Angry Men, so they were familiar with each other. Walter Matthau plays a role similar to George C. Scott's, except he's a civilian and a political scientist, who just happened to have been in the Pentagon during the crisis. He tries to advise a full-out attack as a way to minimize losses.
Secretary, now is when we must send in the first strike.
Both of these characters are based in part on political scientist Herman Kahn, who did think that nuclear war, while being devastating, was winnable. Failsafe is well shot and directed, making a film that lacks action quite interesting. It uses a harsh contrast lighting, while sometimes is a little too noticeable, works well for the tone, and it uses its low budget quite well, even using UPA animators John and Faith Hubley for board animations of the planes, as a substitute for real plane combat scenes. It doesn't show that much footage of the planes actually flying, but it's not needed as the drama within the command centers is strong enough on its own. Kubrick, having something of a budget, did get aerial footage, and was able to use a lot of it for rear projection, which makes for a more immersive atmosphere, and does aid the tension well, especially in the final scenes. In terms of quality, both are quite top-notch. They are both made extremely competently, and both achieve their main goals. Strangelove being a good satirical comedy, and Failsafe being a tight thriller. They both have a similar message, that nuclear war is bad. But if I had to choose which film I prefer, I would easily pick Dr. Strangelove, because I thought that Failsafe was a little too preachy with this message, where you even have President Fonda telling, essentially, the audience the message.
We're to blame, both of us. We let our machines get out of hand.
And also, this scene where General Black, played by Irish actor Dan O'Herlihy, and you can tell sometimes,
Well, you can fight a limited war, and you know it.
expresses a view, which even to Lumet's admission is not a view a typical American general would have.
What gives us the right to live then? What makes us worth surviving?
This film also has some scenes which are unintentionally comedic.
And do.
Gentlemen, I am taking over command of this post at the specific order of the President of the United States.
He really thought that would work. And this scene where the wife of the pilot is trying to plead with him to turn around, but she doesn't offer any way for him to know that it's actually her, and is just yelling. And there is a decision the president made that seems quite extreme even for the scenario. But of course it is an extreme scenario. But despite the minor complaints of Failsafe, which is mostly in the writing, it doesn't reflect Lumet's direction, I still recommend giving it a watch. Then Strangelove is a nice double feature. It's even the way Lumet would have liked it, and if Failsafe brings you down too much, Strangelove will cheer you up. Now you may notice that the films are very similar, a little more than to be a coincidence. And Kubrick knew whatever film released first would probably steal the thunder of the other one, especially since Failsafe was being directed by Lumet, who had already directed the acclaimed film 12 Angry Men. So Kubrick took a look at the novel Failsafe and noticed that it was strikingly similar to Red Alert, which came out first. They are both tales about some rogue planes that are going to drop bombs on the Soviet Union against the express wishes of the president, who is having difficulty recalling them, and they both end with the Americans working with the Soviets to shoot them down, while also trying to recall them. They also include a character who wants the president to seek this opportunity to launch a full-out attack so they can endure minimum losses. There were quite a few similarities, and Kubrick decided to sue, on behalf of Peter George, Failsafe in the production. This made some headlines, but after a while it was settled out of court, with Columbia, the studio behind Kubrick's picture, acquiring the rights to Failsafe, and Kubrick securing an earlier release date. Columbia and Kubrick won out, with Kubrick's film doing very well at the box office and being critically acclaimed. While Failsafe did get a lot of critical acclaim, it didn't do too well at the box office. I also think it being quite dark and serious didn't help it either, because President Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, which delayed the release of the film to 64. People probably wanted something that would make them laugh, and that's what Strangelove offered. But Failsafe did get a lot of renewed interest in later years, with there even being a remake in 2000, a live television play with George Clooney. So give the films a watch. Failsafe is free on YouTube. They're also both in the Criterion Collection, so watch them however you like. Bye bye.